And good evening, fellow writers and authors and creative people of all types. Welcome back to Monday and the writing stream. It's good to be here once more. I hope you're having a good Monday. I've had a busy Monday. I've been doing lots of really boring stuff today, but dull but worthy, shall we say. It pays the bills, but it's not what I would be doing ideally on my Monday, especially when the sun is out. I mean, it just seems like a really bad thing to be doing, but never mind. We are here now to do some... Yes, it's Batman. I'm extremely... I'm all in black, with a black background, with a black t-shirt, with a black hat, with a Batman sign, and the rest of me is, shades of grey. Dear, never mind, what can I do? But, so there we go. Yeah, so Batman. Batman. Well, the 60s Batman anyway. Which is the only one I really like, to be honest. I think that's probably because I watched it first. Batman to me is just a comic strip with kapow, splat, kaboom, sock, all that sort of stuff. I find it really hard to take Batman seriously because I just remember the original stuff. So it's just an Adam West thing as far as I'm concerned. Have I had my dinner? Exactly. Right, let's do the thing because the thing is important. Welcome one and welcome all. So who we have? We have Havaboo who is first in the chat. Commander JR 1988 is here as well. Commander Solek. The Hardgunners are here, ready to invade Arrakis. And apparently there's a June 2 coming out. So that's going to be exciting to see what you nefarious evil guys get up to in that thing. Wintermute is here, of course. Wintermute GB, of course. The Arrakis is here, hopefully once again defending themselves on the Harkonnens and perhaps getting their revenge. We'll find out. Commander Duskdawn is here. Commander Terraferra is here, of course, and always he is, which is always good to see. Alan is here as well. Merlin West Coast, hello, good to see you. Kelly Baglar, who thinks again, he's here as well. The Shadow Wyvern is here. Dr. Quest MD is working on his car. Anyway, so I hope that goes well. I did a bit of working on my car as well this afternoon. I fixed an idle stabilization valve and a micro switch. So there we go. Good luck to you as well, Dr. Quest MD. And there we go. The Shadow Wyvern is here. Sothy St. Gothwell is here as well. Yes, we're all here, which is fantastic. The Bat Shark Repellent is clearly a fond memory. Indeed, all that sort of good stuff. Very, very camp, very cheesy, the original Batman. But that's the problem. I think my hat isn't even straight today, but there we go. One of the things you note about things is the thing that you see first tends to set the tone for everything else, isn't it? It's a bit like Star Trek. I judge everything Star Trek on the original series because that's my first memories of Star Trek. And the first Batman I ever watched was the Adam West stuff. So that's as far as I'm concerned, that sets it in concrete. That's what it is, and everything else is a delta from the original, which may not be fair because of course it's not necessarily always. I haven't always seen the first thing of the thing. In which case my delta may be offset, but hey, what can you do? I'm a flawed human being, but there we go. I did quite enjoy the latest Batman film. I mean, Batman's very dark, isn't it? In all the modern stuff, he's very mean and moody and stuff. As I preferred, atomic batteries to power, turbos to speed to the Batcave. Let's go, and everyone else apart from Batman and Robin being exceedingly dumb. So it's very, very, very easy to outwit them. You could always tell who the baddies were because they lived in places with tilted floors or offset cameras, which is much more likely. So there we go. But the first Batman I ever saw was Tim Burton's one. Yeah, I know. I think the first thing you see, it's a little bit like also in music. I mean, I didn't realise for quite a long time that the Pet Shop Boys, for those of you who know the Pet Shop Boys, and You Were Always on My Mind, wasn't an original track. I'd kind of, because the Pet Shop Boys generally wrote their own stuff. I assumed that Always on Your Mind was an original Pet Shop Boys track for quite a few numbers of years, until I came across the Elvis version. I was like, what's all this going on? Why is he singing it so slow without a disco beat? Why is he redoing the Pet Shop? Hang on a minute, he's dead. He can't. What? That's the original version, really? And it completely skews your sense of the entire universe. Which is quite disorienting. So things like that. So you've got you do have to reset your things sometimes. The Adam West Batman was just too campy for me. See, it was just a Saturday morning thing for me as far as I was concerned. Batman was one of the weird things that you watched. And I love that spinny animation. It's just really, really good. And Go West also, I think it's like, what? Why they don't need to do cover versions? So very, very strange, but so there we are. So yes, it's odd, isn't it? Some of the things you watch and you go, and most of the time I do prefer the original. I would say probably about 80% of the time, if there's an original of something, then I usually prefer the original of it. But not always. And I think it depends. If I've heard, particularly with music, if I've heard a cover version of something first, and that's the first time I've come across that piece of music or that song for whatever reason, then that's the version, as far as I'm concerned, in my brain, that becomes the definitive one, and anything else is like a strange copy, even if it's the original. I mean, there's a beautiful song which I can't remember the title of now. No, it'll come back, but anyway, it doesn't really matter. I for years again thought that was the original version and discovered it wasn't, and I don't like the original one. Where the Streets Have No Name, so I knew that one before the Pet Shop Boys covered it. So it's odd, isn't it? It is strange, but there we go. Anyway, so I hope you guys are all having a good a good Monday. So yeah, be busy, but not doing anything particularly writing-y in the last few days. An advance notice, I'm afraid. I will be on holiday next week. So I won't be here next week, and we'll pick up the writing streams in a fortnight or so. So advance warning. I'm going on holidays again. I know, it's outrageous, isn't it? Going on holidays. I'm taking a week off. We're actually going to see the Grand Prix, the Formula One Grand Prix on Sunday. So I'm quite looking forward to doing that. So that should be quite good. Tainted Love, not a soft cell original. Yeah, it's all these songs. And it's like, what? It is weird. And I suppose you can transfer that to writing as well, to a degree, because you can't make a cover version of a book, can you? At least not directly. Otherwise it's called plagiarism, and that's illegal, and you can go to prison. So don't do that. You're copying somebody's other book and well, actually, copying somebody's other book and not changing the title, which I suppose is kind of what you're doing in music, because it's interesting, isn't it? Because I can make a cover version of something, and it's sort of a tribute to the original artist, isn't it, when it comes to a piece of music? But you can't make a cover version of a book. Says, here's my version of Lord of the Rings by Drew Wagar. It's a cover version of Tolkien's. But you can kind of get quite close. So, I mean, you could accuse me, for example, with Laws of Midnight of doing exactly that. But I had to change the name to protect the innocent. And you could argue that people like, what's his name, with the Shannara series. Who's that? Brooks. What's his first name? Total brain fade. That's the age catching up with me. Michael? No, it can't be. No, it's Michael Brooks is the guy from Elite. It's Brooks. No, it's not David Brooks. Who is it? Something Brooks. Terry Brooks. There we go. The chat would come to my rescue. There we go. Yeah, well done, everybody. It's the problem with the chat. It's got a 15-second delay in it, so I have to wait. I'm really embarrassed while you guys catch up. You could argue, and people have, and people did, that the Sword of Shannara was a cover version, or as it was called at the time, a rip-off of Tolkien. That seems to be somewhat more frowned upon in the literary world than it does in the kind of music world. But it's impossible not to be inspired by works that have gone before and maybe crib a little bit from them in terms of the way they're structured and the big themes. And Tolkien himself, I'm sure if he was live and on the stream today, which he isn't and he can't be, we'd admit that he'd studied all sorts of ancient myths and legends and Norse stuff, and he was kind of inspired by them. So is there ever an original story? Difficult question to answer. Will I share the pictures I take of Silverstone? Yes, I'll make sure I take a whole bunch of pictures and whack them up on Twitter or something as we're getting around, because that should be quite good. It is hard to come up with a totally unique story, and I think. On one hand, every story is totally unique, isn't it? Because clearly the words aren't the same, so they're different, right? How much of a fundamental aspects of a story do you have to change before it becomes a different story? I don't know what the answer to that one is. If you have a dark evil lord and you have a heroic troupe of characters who take on dark evil lord and destroy the source of his power with a talisman that's destroyed in some arcane fashion using magic. Is that a rip-off of Tolkien, or is that just an alternative story? If you have a plucky farm boy who inherits his father's weapon, rescues a princess and then destroys the source of the evil baddie's power base, is that a rip-off of Star Wars, or is that a rip-off of something else? It is tough. And you can recycle. And the other problem you do have is if you have a boy meets girl story, well, that's happened before in other books. People meet and they fall in love. Is that original? Well, it does happen quite a lot, so it's not unreasonable to do that. Harry Potter versus Star Wars. In fact, there was that other one written by a young lad whose dad owned a publishing firm, which was all slightly dodgy. I can't remember what it was. Something to do with a dragon. Aragorn? No, it can't be Aragorn. That's a character from Lord of the Rings. Eragon, I think it was. Can't remember the chap's name. And it was, if you analyse the plot, it is kind of almost analogous. There we go, Eragon. Is almost analogous to Star Wars. And, was that a conscious intention to do that, or was it accidental? It's difficult to tell. And it was lampooned actually by dear old Douglas Adams, wasn't it? Boy meets girl underneath silvery moon, which then explodes for no readily apparent reason. He's working his plot summary. That Christopher Paolini. I don't know how you pronounce that. Paolini sounds about right. He at a very young age, from what I understand, wrote a fantasy novel which seemed to go down okay. It was turned into a film, so he did all right there. And and you're quite right, Glenn. It's the hero journey structure. So the hero starts out as a callow youth of some kind, meets generally a wise person who's kind of been there, done that before, but has some sort of tragic backstory. Meets a bunch of other characters along the way. Usually rescues either a princess or a prince, or some other love interest along the way, depending on how the story is structured. And then has some beef with the ultimate bad guy, who is eventually defeated at the hands of the youth, who through all these trials and tribulations has learned something about himself and matured and sophisticated as a result. It's that classic kind of story. Those structures are they work. Okay, everyone likes them. Well, most people like them because you understand what's happening. The callow youth or the naive young girl, whatever it happens to be. They learn something about themselves in the process of becoming the thing, and there you go. And the hidden it's Macbeth, or some of them are Shakespearean tropes that go back. Merchant of Venice and Macbeth and Much Ado About Nothing, and all those. they're all there. Okay, is there an original idea in storytelling? Possibly, and maybe that's a very Western way of looking at literature. We tend to recycle the same things in Western literature, perhaps. And maybe that's why it's good to have diversity of authors from different cultures, because we get to hear some different kind of origin stories that maybe we haven't heard before. Do those? I mean, question is a bit of a philosophical question here from Glenn, Commander Terra Firma. Do those structures make too many things seem the same, or is it legitimately just a good way to tell a story? I think it's a bit of both. I think it's a good way to tell a story because it's always popular. I mean, you can always use people. Yeah, and we'll get onto this because today's topic obviously is characterization. But you tend to associate with the underdog. Somebody who has had maybe a tricky upbringing, or lost their parents, or is an orphan for whatever reason, or lives in in the poor slum and betters themselves. You've got that whole, Charles Dickensy kind of thing, where there's the urchin child who becomes good at the end. All those sort of things have got similar elements to it. It's the underdog fighting adversity against the system is quite a. And sometimes that system can be just normal society. Sometimes the system can be an overpowering, ghastly empire. Sometimes it's the political structure. All those sort of things. Pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps. Making yourself. The American dream. I mean, tell me about the American dream. That's surely the same sort of trope, right? Don't forget that Shakespeare is best within the original Klingon. Kapla! Exactly. So they are storytelling tropes, and there are a lot of storytelling tropes. There's an entire website devoted to storytelling tropes, and there's entire websites that have pulled apart all of these things and analysed them to the nth degree. But they work. And they're used because they work. Okay, they're good storytelling things. I've used them. The idea of a character who's put upon by society or by other people, to make you, the reader, have some sympathy for them, so that you're I'm rooting for this character because they've clearly had a hard time, but they haven't, and so it seems that they haven't deserved it. I'm on their side. It's a classic hook to get your readers to sympathise a bit with the character that you're creating, so that you'll follow them through the story. And the chosen one. Okay, now this is another one. This one is quite often a number of fantasy novels. Is that the prophecy says. There's some ancient prophecy given by some bard or some great prophet or prophetess of ancient times, who says something fairly obscure and very easy to misinterpret, which is passed down by generations and generations. And then when the stars align and when the stones are turned and when the moon shines upon the rock and when the sky in the east is red and there's a glow to the north and the clouds are the same shape as the lion's head, then the chosen one shall be revealed. And then cut, and it's it's usually again some young peasant person in a village completely unaware of their destiny that has to take on and defeat the powers that be. The chosen one, the one person who for some reason fate has decided is going to be the linchpin of the entire story, is the thing around which the story is concerned. Those have fallen out of favour a bit because they're just too predictable in recent sort of years, because the moment who the chosen one is, it's basically they're undefeatable, right? Because clearly the chosen one is the chosen one, so they can't lose, because otherwise they wouldn't be the chosen ones, unless you have a false chosen one kind of narrative going on, in which you trick the reader into believing, I'm going to trick you into the chosen one narrative, and then I'm going to kill them off. Which just seems, rather mean. So there are all sorts of choices. I'm always really annoyed with the prophecies, because the prophecies are so vague, aren't they? I mean, it's like there will be a seventh son of a seventh son born in the year of the dragon under a full moon. Okay, well there's still thousands of them. Okay, how do you know this one's the chosen one? So the prophecies have to be very, very, very specific to being used, and prophecies never are. And then what usually happens is, quite often the author will go, yes, well, the prophecy, if you had interpreted it this way, would mean something entirely different. False positive Messiah, exactly. Frozen one, no, I said the frozen chum. I mean, the bucket of fish bait can the world. So and if you start with loads of power and stuff, you always lose your memory, end up in jail. The apocalypse happens, all of them. Yeah, so bad stuff happens. Yeah, so sometimes you're brought low before you can be brought back up again, and you have to learn a valuable lesson about something before you can carry on to the final chapter. And we've talked about structure of books before, and the classic storytelling of this type is very much okay. So you have this kind of cadence. I can't do a graph very very well here, so I'm going to do it by hand. But you have a sort of cadence where so it ramps up and it ramps up and ramps up, and there's a little bit of a moment, and then it kind of drops down again. It's like more characters, more stuff, and tension, and then there's a drop again, and then eventually it's tension. The final episode! Wow! Oh, we've succeeded, and then we're okay, and then that's. That's your classic book structure. Is you have crises to resolve, which build up to the final crisis, which is usually Star Wars, for example. The attack on the Death Star is the final crisis, and then it's resolved, and the heroes are like, "Yay, we did the thing," and everything's good. End of story. So all those sort of things. So so that's classic, classic tropes. I think that's quite interesting. Prophecy just means you're a prolific storyteller. I think, well, it does make you wonder. If you're just a good storyteller, people go, "Oh yeah, but the guy who came to himself, he was very convincing. He said these things. Yeah, but he just made them up." No. He was anointed with the power of the ancient ones. Was he? Yeah. I heard him say, and the light shone down and everything. Oh well, he must have been telling the truth then. Okay, so let's turn that into a story that will pass down from generation to generation. You can see how these things would get out of hand. Prophecies and prophets, very, very dodgy. Don't put your faith in those. Anyway, right, we're supposed to be talking about characterization tonight. So, characterization. What do we mean by that in the whole process of writing novels? Now, it again, and as I say this in every single writing stream that I've done recently, it depends, right? Everything depends. There's no certainties, okay, in writing whatsoever. So the moment I say anything definitive, you can immediately go, yes, true, but it depends, and you'd be absolutely right. Okay, so it does depend. Do you need characterization? Well, it depends what you're writing. I do, because my books are character-driven novels. So if they weren't good characters, at least hopefully good characters, the book wouldn't kind of work. Okay, and generally readers do prefer to have some characters they can associate with on various different levels. Now that might be because of their, the character's outlook, or it might be the character's behaviour, or it might be the character's age or creed or race or beliefs or whatever it happens to be. Okay, now you've got an awful lot of choice there to play around with in terms of your characters, and as you design a character, or as you let a character evolve in your story, that should affect how that character acts in the rest of the story. So if you decide that you're going to start off with a young 8-year-old boy, you wouldn't normally expect them to come out with great big insights on on the history of the world necessarily. Or come up with some amazing insights into the dynamics of quantum physics and black holes. You might, but it depends on the character. Okay, so what is your character about? What attributes do they have? Are they smart? Are they a bit dumb? Are they clever? Are they lazy? Are they intuitive? Are they selfish? Are they arrogant? Are they trusting? Are they naive? All these sort of things you can play around with and chuck into your character mix, okay? And decide what sort of character it is that helps you tell the story. Or, just create a random mix of characters and sort of see what happens as you start writing. What you're aiming for, though, is the sort of people that you possibly could meet, I think, in real life, okay? So, what most readers are looking for is a character that they can kind of go, yeah, I know somebody a bit like that, or that's the kind of person I wouldn't mind being. Maybe an aspirational character is okay, and the flip side, I kind of, God, yeah, that guy, he's really bad. I don't like him at all, but it's fun to watch what he does. Or sometimes it's a character go, I wish I could be more like them. I mean, I wouldn't dare say anything like that, but I'm glad he said it. Those sort of things. Characters that people would like to be. And you can develop those over time. So I have a lot of fun creating characters and deciding what they're going to be like. And I write little test scenes to sort of see how they react. Usually I just write some arguments, because an argument is a good piece of dialogue to figure out what the character's really thinking. And figuring out what your characters like. Glenn says, my characters tend to start telling me I have no idea who they are about halfway through. Yeah, so characters are one of those strange things, and authors' relationships with their characters is a curious thing, because you create these imaginary people out of thin air. Obviously, they don't really exist. They might be based on aspects of people that you have met. Or they might be an idealised person that you haven't met, or they might just be, a random collection of things that you've observed in different people. I've certainly pinched characteristics for my characters from real life people, not in their entirety, but aspects of, those are sort of things that you can do, and it can have an awful lot of fun. But they do evolve, and sometimes a lot of writers talk about this. They lose control of their characters, and their characters stop doing their own thing in the story. It's like, what are you doing? I'm writing this story. What the hell do you think you're doing? Get back on the page. And so a lot of writers report that. I personally don't. My characters do what I tell them, because I'm very strict. I crack the whip. They no, you're not going off topic. Get over there. Do what you're supposed to be doing in this scene. But that's because I'm a bit of a plotter. I tend to plot things out. Now, if you're a more pantry kind of writer, you may find your characters going off and doing all sorts of things that you didn't intend. And I don't think that's wrong. I think that's just another way of writing. But if they go off and do their own thing, then it's up to you somehow to pull the entire story back together and figure out what the heck's going on. Which sounds very, very peculiar, that you could invent what presumably are aspects of your own personality that go off and do their own thing. Which is really, really good. Merlin West Coast says, can you explain the use of argument? So what I mean by that is basically I write test scenes for my characters. So I basically put character A and character B in a blank environment, a room or something, doesn't really matter, and get them to have an argument about a topic. So one of them, it might be, okay, we're going to go west. No, west is bad. What do you mean west is bad? We've been going west all this time. And I just force them to argue and see how, in my head, given how I've designed the characters, how the argument goes. Do they sulk? Do they pout? Do they strop? Do they shout? What do they do to kind of get their point across? And I try and make both characters win. Sometimes one will resort to logic, someone will resort to emotion, someone more to emotional blackmail, and I just sort of see how it goes, and that helps me define, what the characters are like. And so, little test scenes. The first book I ever wrote, Torn, the genesis of that was an argument. I wrote a scene where basically I had a fundamentalist, born-again Christian girl, I think it was, young woman, and a sort of rather cynical scientist, and I put them in a car that was stuck in a snowdrift. I don't know, I hadn't worked out how they got stuck in the snowdrift at this point. Just they just were stuck in the snowdrift, so they couldn't go anywhere. They were stuck with each other for, I don't know, like say a couple of hours in the snowdrift, and they just argued about faith and science. Okay. And that was the genesis of the book. I basically put two people with very, very strong viewpoints in a situation where they couldn't get out of it, and they had to have an argument. And they had to have an argument in sense of they were forced to listen to each other because they couldn't get out of the car because it was freezing cold blizzard conditions outside. So, and they didn't they didn't come to physical blows, even though they got very angry with each other. They had to have an argument. That was the only thing left for them to do, and that was a very useful sort of test condition I used to kind of create the nub of the novel. Drew goes off topic. Never happens. No waffles. No waffles allowed. Can't go off topic if your entire book is a waffle. So creating a character, okay, that might sound quite a daunting thing, and it can be. I think it can be. Now there are a few traps here for the unwary. Okay, now the first one is fairly obvious, and I don't think many of you guys would suffer from this, but it's worth pointing out, is the Mary Sue. Okay, now I've got a nice picture here that I nabbed from the internet earlier. Let me stick it on the screen. How to tell if your character is a Mary Sue. Okay, here we go. Right, let me just fire this up to full screen. Da, 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 there we go. So this one is I quite like this one actually, because it's overemphasized to a fault. So, how to tell if your character is a Mary Sue? And there's a male version of this called the Gary Stew, I think it is. So basically, if your character is a Mary Sue or a Gary Stew, you're not doing your process of creating a character properly. Okay, so here is I'm saying something on my stream which I never say anywhere else, which activates my phone and it starts beeping. So get away, stupid technology. So yeah, here's a character who is, I mean, ignore the green hair and the tail. I'm not quite sure what's going on there. But what are her hobbies? Okay, what does this girl like doing? Sure, she likes playing video games, drawing, going to the movies, listening to music, gardening, and hanging out with her friends. She's not very athletic, but she likes playing tennis. Okay, I don't know what GPA stands for. I presume that's some sort of school ability, maybe. I don't know. What's her secret power? She can turn into a cat every time she hears a Meow Mix song, and she has a cat named Jingles. Weaknesses: she cries too much, can't dance, is a clumsy, and she's not very good at maths. Okay, so you know, it's a bit of a weird image. A grade point average. Oh, okay, is that an American thing? Okay, I've never heard of that. Okay, so she's a B plus, so she's okay but not brilliant. So you know, so she's got some weaknesses, she's got some strengths. Fair enough. Okay, so that's a US school thing. So so her name is Amy Makeda. Compare to what does it say there? Jasmine Rose Silverlight. Okay, so the name's already a bit of a giveaway here. Age 17, but so mature she looks older. Okay. Hair over here, it just says hair green. Hair on this one is burnished summer gold with streaks of sunset orange. Okay. Emerald green eyes. She's half this, she's half that, she's half this as well, she's half that, she's half this. Okay, that's 5.5 halves. But it's okay because she's perfect. And she can create music, writing, drawing, learning, speaking foreign languages, running, bicycling, hiking, flying her airplane, flirting with all the boys who have a crush on her, exploring Mayan ruins, travelling, race car driving, scuba diving, and flower arranging. She's brilliant at soccer, basketball, tennis, archery, polo, softball, volleyball, swimming, golf, badminton, bike racing, gymnastics, and ballet. She's got a GPA, this school thing, of A+, of course. Secret power: she can fly and teleport and create fireballs and phoenixes, changes weather, can change into and summon any animal, creates galaxies. Telepathy, and that's I don't know what a KL is there, of 3, I don't know what that number is, 3 trillion, I think, and can talk to unicorns, and she can't die. Okay. Companions: she has a unicorn, a tiger, a wolf, a dragon, and anything else she wants. Weaknesses: what? She has no weaknesses at all. Okay, so now very extreme example of a very, very bad character. Okay, but it makes a point. Okay, if your character never fails at anything, there's something wrong. Okay, if your character is intrinsically talented at all sorts of things, that's wrong as well. Okay, if your character is always popular with everybody and everyone's like, oh, she's so amazing, that's not good either. Okay, your character needs to have some flaws or some weaknesses or things that they're not good at. You know, maybe they're awkward in social circumstances, or realistic people who have issues. I mean, like me, I have issues. I'm a strange guy who sits in front of this computer and talks to nameless people on the internet every Monday afternoon. I've got problems. But yeah, this is the point. Okay, you want to have characters that people can kind of relate to, and it's very common actually in TV and film to have not quite as extreme as this, but characters who demonstrate impossible things. I mean, a recent one for me actually is the character of Rey from the new Star Wars films. I don't really have a problem with the actress at all. I think she's actually quite good at what she does. But the character of Rey in the latest Star Wars films is too good. It's too Mary Sue. She starts off as a scavenger on a backward planet, and then is able to fly a spaceship because she clearly learned that from somewhere. Okay, she learns the Force really fast. Becomes incredibly powerful at it, has all the skills of being able to use lightsaber without being taught it by anybody, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so she's too good. Okay, she's too talented. It's unrealistically talented compared to anybody else in that universe, so it's easy to make that mistake. You might be wanting your character to be popular and likable, and you can go too far with that. Now, I was very keen. Your character can be very good at something. You're quite right there. I mean, but there has to be a reason why they're very good at it. They have to have put some effort. That backstory of theirs has to reflect the fact they've put some effort into whatever it is they're good at. So if they're a brilliant mathematician, they can't just be a brilliant mathematician or violin player or lightsaber wielder or swords person or anything like that. Okay, all those sort of things. Okay, it can't just be good that quickly. They have to have a backstory that reflects that in some fashion. So make a character, or at least refer to things in the thing. Now, I did that deliberately. So for those of you who know my Shadewood saga, use examples of my own work. I start off with let's take the character Kiri, for example, who her backstory early on. She has a fight which she actually loses in the first chapter of the book. Against she basically is fighting 3 teenage boys, and she loses because she's very likely to lose a fight with 3 teenage boys. She makes a fairly good account of herself. She actually kills one of them because he falls off a roof. But then she falls off the roof too and is stunned, and then they basically almost beat her to death. So she loses this fight. Okay, but you can tell she's a fighter from that initial thing. And then over the course of the book, she is trained to be an increasingly more effective and lethal fighter by the use of weapons, various things. But it takes a book worth of time, which is actually several years in reality, in the lapse time, to train her to become the fighter that she eventually becomes. She has a talent, she has the ability to do that, but she isn't instantly good at it. And that's important to sort of see that. The personality flaws are built in as well. So to start with, she's very arrogant and impatient, and she has to be taught. You can't do that straight away. You're going to have to wait. You're going to have to show some patience. You have to show some respect to your betters in this particular example, because you're not there yet. So all those sort of things you can build into a character's backstory. Now, what you don't always have to show that in the story that you're telling, but it has to be there in the back of your mind as to how that character got to be the way they are. And that's the important thing, I think. So if you bring in a character at the beginning of a story and they are like this, okay, they are a great fighter, or they're arrogant, or they're cynical, or they're bitter and twisted, whatever it happens to be, what happened to that character before the story that you're telling started, right, that made them that way? Okay, that's what you need to have a little bit of a thing. Now, you don't have to plot out their entire life story, right, because you're not going to necessarily use that information, but it might be handy to make some notes. Okay, it might be handy to make some notes, because you can put the character into a situation where sometimes they have a little bit of a breakdown in the story, and that childhood, or whatever happened in the recent past of their background, becomes an important resource for the other characters to go, oh, that's why she's like that. Okay, because somebody did something to her 3 years ago and she's never really dealt with it. That becomes an important part of the realism of the character. Okay, so that you go, okay, so that kind of makes sense. I understand her a bit more now, and thus I'm a little bit more inclined to kind of root for her as a character. Okay, it makes the character more realistic. So characters that are either bland, who don't really do anything or react to anything, or characters that are just too good, or characters that are just bad because I'm the baddie, don't really cut the mustard. Okay, they don't really work well enough, to be taken seriously in a decent story. So it's worth spending some time to doing that kind of thing. So what does this look like? I mean, let me show you the sort of thing that I do. I'm going to pop this up on the screen for the shade word stuff, because it's always good to work from an example. To sort of, how much detail do I need to do all this sort of stuff? You don't need it probably as much as you think. I mean, you don't need to write an entire CV or biography for your character. That's probably going too much, unless you want to, unless you find that fun. But you don't need to do that. Let me see if I can find my my document here. Okay, so let me scroll down. What did I do for my characters? So main characters. Here we go. Unusually for me in Shade, but I didn't do any imagery. I normally do some imagery. Tolkien. Well, interesting of Tolkien. Tolkien did do some biographies for quite a lot of his characters. But if you look at the entire list of characters in Tolkien, an awful lot of them are just there because they're the son of somebody else, or the or the father of somebody else, and he liked his chronologies, his things like that. But not all of them were particularly fleshed out. So that's quite interesting. So this is what this again. Your mileage may vary, as the Americans say, but apologies to any Americans who don't say that. It's a phrase I've got from you, so it's all your fault. This is what I did. Okay, this is what I did. So I've been talking about Kiri here, what's basically happened to her? Well, she was taken to Drayden as a child and grew up there in and around the temple as an acolyte after being rescued from the slums as a young girl. Okay. A fiery and tempestuous young woman, she quickly learns to assert and defend herself, earning a fearsome reputation for violence, anger, and a short temper. Okay, she's driven by the need to prove herself, evidenced by early competitive chariot racing, hiding a deep insecurity about her apparent lack of birth to a named family. Okay, so she's got an inferiority complex. She's trying to prove herself. She's impatient. She's quite angry. She's quite good at violence and does it a lot. She wears her hair long on the left side and shaved over her ear on the right. That's just a stylistic thing. She has few scruples, detests cowardice, and has no time for the infirm, disabled, or sick. Okay, so she's actually not very nice in that way. If you're injured, tough. If you're disabled, tough. Okay, if you're sick, it's tough. Okay, I'm not, so you're getting left behind. That's her attitude. You may not like it, and you don't have to like the character. Okay, that they just have to be consistent. That's how they are. Belligerent to many, but cold and calculating underneath, she's no one's fool. She's taller than average and also stronger, keeping herself in formidable physical fitness, having mastered many forms of combat. She is prone to embarking on vendettas. Never forgets an insult, becoming single-minded and obsessed with what she perceives as priorities. She believes she is superior to most, if not all, of her contemporaries. It's not sufficient that she wins, others must lose. Okay, so that's how I initially designed her character. That's where she came from. And then the other thing I tried, which I haven't done since, but I did find quite useful at the time, is basically get the character to basically state their own viewpoint in their own words. Try that. So I got Kiri to say in this, the weak are irrelevant, as are the sick and the infirm. Only the strong survive, and that's the way of things. Expect no mercy and give none. That's her philosophy in life. Okay, so that kind of sets the tone for the kind of individual she is, and then everything else derives from that. Her attitude and her thing, and then I've sort of fleshed out her backstory and stuff that kind of went on from there. Compare and contrast to another character here, Zoella, so Zoella was hidden in a pauper family at birth and has no knowledge of her heritage. She's actually got a heritage that she doesn't know about. She is a gentle soul with a caring and compassionate nature, highly geared towards animals, which she has a special affinity due to the gift. So she likes hanging around with animals and creatures and stuff. She has no great ambition and is humble and grateful for the opportunity to work as a maid. Okay, because that's advancing her position as far as she's concerned. Zoella exhibits a high degree of empathy and understanding of others, often leaving herself open to exploitation and abuse as a result. She thinks the best of people. She wants to help. She wants to make things better. She's sympathetic. I've said that. She expects the best in others and is frequently disappointed by their behaviour. We've all been there, right? She is slight in stature with simple brown hair and brown eyes. Despite her vulnerability, she has great reserves of strength and determination, and she can be overly stubborn as a result. She believes her morals and outlook the most important part of her makeup, and seeks to make the best of all situations, even at great cost to herself. She has an interest in music and poetry. She has a mannerism of holding her head in her hands and hiding behind her hair when thinking or in despair. As she matures, she develops a mischievous and quirky sense of humour. Okay, so that gives you a flavour of what she's like. And then what does she say about herself? She says, life is about how we care for others despite the hardships and perils of the world. If we don't care, then we have no purpose being here. Okay, there we go, that's what she's like. And then the third of the kind of trilogy of people is Maru. Now, Maru's male character that some of you all know. Born to his parents, he's estranged from them, having run away from home to avoid a dull existence on the family farm. Okay, so a bit cliched, but hey. He's fascinated by the workings of things, often to the exclusion of people. So he doesn't really get people. People are complicated and weird and difficult to understand. Technology and stuff is much more his thing. So he may appear offish and unconcerned. He's far more interested in machines and technology than people. Averagely tall but wiry, athletically built, he has a tendency towards arrogance and dismissive of those for which, in his view, simplistic or contrary views. So he doesn't, if you don't agree with him, he kind of like dismisses you. Okay. He has lust for adventure and refuses to be tied down into his experiences of the wider world. He likes flying and sailing. He's also adept at fixing things. He has a strong dislike of politicians and anything that distracts from the pursuit of technology. Okay, so that's his motivation. People just get in the way. Technology holds, and this is what he says about himself, technology holds the promise of improving everybody's life from the poorest to the richest. If only people would overcome their prejudices and just get on with it. All right. So that's how I went about designing the back, the elements of that particular story. And it's worth doing a bit like that. So you can then go back and refer to it and go, okay, so this character here was, in a very harsh environment as a child, and that's made an impact on them now. This character had a relaxed, privileged, pleasant environment as a child, and that then makes, makes them very different. Now it could be that a privileged upbringing basically says, I'm entitled. We have in the UK still very much. I don't know how it is in other parts of the world. We have a bit of a class structure in the UK, which is even after centuries is still here. Where some people basically, we're richer, therefore we're better. It's as simple as that. And they genuinely believe this. So those sort of classist attitudes can come out in the characters as well. Well, we are the exalted ones. We are worthy of worship. We are the elite. We are the we are your betters. I'm sorry, it's just true. So all that sort of stuff can be built into characters. You've got such a rich set of things that you can choose from. So you've got all the emotional things like are the characters loving? Are the characters hostile? Are they arrogant? Are they angry? Are they violent? Are they kind? Are they compassionate? Do they show empathy? Do they not care? Are they just in it for the money? All of those sort of things you can mix in. Then you got the kind of physical stuff as well, so which is pretty easy. You just choose what your character looks like. You might want to go with a few things like the old scar down the cheek or the eye patch or whatever it is that you want to have to do. But don't get too carried away with those kind of things. But I think the backstory to your character is a very interesting point, and try and have something that's a little bit distinct about them. That's one of the things that I did with Shadewood, was each character has a little thing that they do, which is, oh, that's them. I mentioned it with Zoella there. When she's upset or when she's thinking, she's got kind of long hair. So what she'll do is she'll sort of flop her head forward, and then her hair will go in front of her face, and she'll just hide behind kind of a mane of hair while she's thinking or crying or whatever it happens to be. Whereas Maru would always be asking but what about the thing? What about, squirrel moment, basically. It's very like me, actually, in some ways, is Maru. What about, we could investigate that. And everyone basically has to keep reading him in. So there's always a case of, Maru, stop it! Just, no, focus on the thing that we're doing. And that becomes a bit of a theme for that character, okay? Because he's like, oh, yeah, but look at the thing! And the other characters have to rein him in. Whereas Kiri would, her kind of thing that she did quite a lot was just to run, because she's got hair grown on one side of her head because it's a stylistic thing with shaved on the other. She would run her hand through the longer part of her hair. That was just I'm thinking kind of thing. Don't disturb me right now because I'm trying to work something out. And that is that is part of the setup of the character, to make them a little bit distinct from each other. It's good to throw in little things like that mannerisms that people have. Mannerisms that I have. I scratch my nose like that. You probably noticed it when I think. When I sometimes rub my chin, I'll go, what am I thinking about next? I'm thinking, so you can tell when I'm like thinking of the next thing on my list, because I'll tend to scratch my nose because it's like a little comfort thing. And everybody has their little thing that they do, right? You don't necessarily know what the little thing that you do is, but I can guarantee that you do it. All right. So now you're going to be analysing all my hand language. So when I'm kind of, what about the so I'll do that. I'll bite my, I'll nibble the end of my thumb when I'm thinking, I wonder what that is. Or it could be they pull their ear. Some people do that. They go, I don't know. I know what it could be. And then there's the hand gestures. So you can kind of like, some people can be very expressive with their hand. When my poor he's downstairs, so he's probably not watching my streams, I'm okay. But when my eldest son explains something, he's like this. He's just hands everywhere, okay? And that's the thing that he does. And so you can pull in little observations like that. So have a look, and if you dare, go and look at yourself and kind of feel, what's the thing that I do that everyone would go, oh yeah, that's what you do. Because everybody does something when they're thinking or they're concentrating or I'm just going to scratch my nose. Okay, or you kind of like, I don't know, or you kind of, hopefully it's not an embarrassing thing. It might be. My dad used to. I remember him. He always used to, because he had very bushy eyebrows. He used to always do this when he was thinking. He'd brush his eyebrows. I don't know if they got slightly itchy. That was the thing that my dad did. It's like, oh yeah, okay, yes, yeah, I know what you mean, son. It became a bit of a joke, but so I bought my comb once, so there you go, you can comb them out, so it's little things like that you remember, but there are little things like that are distinct to each individual, and if you can make up some that your characters will pick up on, then and then you can use that to kind of guide the reader through. It's so and so. So-and-so doing that. So that's quite good. Glenn says, it would be interesting to do a quote for them at the start of the story, and if it changes at the middle and the end and showing an arc. Yeah, so I haven't done that myself. But it's a good thing to do. What has your character learnt in the course of the story? Have they learnt to be a bit more compassionate? Have they learnt not to look and leap, have jump before they can walk, or run before they can walk? Have they learnt that actually people are important as well as technology? Or have they not learnt anything? Have they gone, actually these people I'm with, actually they're now my friends, and I don't want to lose them. What have they learnt through the process? So I'm very aware of that. So currently as you know, I'm writing a new space opera thing, and I'm bringing the characters together. They're in the process of meeting each other for the first time. They will go on to be a unit of people who do things together. But right now they're effectively strangers to each other. So how does that dynamic change over time? I don't trust this person, don't know who they are, to the point where actually maybe I'll be prepared to give up my life in order to save them. Glenn says, my wife pointed out to me a few years into our marriage that I tend to end a lot of my statements with this or that or whatever, and things I didn't realise I haven't said. Yeah, I mean, there's things that you say which are quite obvious and sometimes endearing, hopefully, to other people, but not necessarily. It's like you may not be aware of them at all. Commander J9 says, I play with my beard when I'm thinking. I mean, that's... Yeah, I mean, what else could a beard be for? It's an excellent thing, isn't it, to play around with. But it's interesting. I mean, I've seen people who will suck their lip. They'll do this. They'll do that, or I've seen you watch a lot of body language. The body language can be very interesting. You'll see people who are listening to you and paying attention will tend to tilt their head when they're listening. I don't know if that helps one ear or something. There's a reason for doing it, but you see that quite a lot. People will tilt their heads. So you can use that in your novels to basically say, the character's really paying attention to what's being said here. Mr. Data, when he grows a beard, when I stroke the beard thusly do I not appear more intellectual. So yeah, that's right. But you can do a lot with things like the classic eye rolls and oh god, all that sort of stuff. And don't underestimate the pregnant pause either, where the character basically doesn't say anything at all, and it's kind of the emphasis there is really. We'll just let that one pass, it's there's a lot of things to play for, and I think the more you can put in, I mean, it has to make sense. It has to make sense. You can't just let's chuck all the emotions into this character and just make them pull everything, because that's not realistic either. But make your character as interesting but kind of logically consistent as you can. I am currently struggling with depicting someone, says Jonathan here, who's driven by crushing guilt, mainly because the things I need him to say give me the impression that he's far more well balanced than that. So I mean, crushing guilt. That to me would go hand in hand with a lot of sort of imposter syndrome and lack of confidence. That sort of stuff. So I wouldn't expect a character like that necessarily to be coming out with too much in the way of definitive stuff, because they'd just be. I would have thought a character in that situation would be wanting to back off from any kind of important decisions. You guys make the call. I'm not going there. That sort of stuff, as opposed to making any kind of definitive statement. So I think you can play around with things like that. So if someone is shouldering a lot of guilt, they're going to be. I would have thought they were going to be quite non-committal and not wanting to be taking sides and not wanting to be involved in big decisions, and whatever you guys decide is right. I don't want to. Don't listen to me. I've made bad choices. The last time I made a decision, it all went badly wrong. Those sort of things is the sort of stuff I think I'd expect in that sort of character to come out with, or be kind of driven by. I don't know. It depends on what the guilt is about, I suppose. Those sort of things. But you can play around with all those kind of scenarios and try different things and try. If a character, for example, is in love, then they will probably act a bit stupidly. If a character is really, really sad, it might be self-pity that they're wallowing in, and somebody else needs to come along and give them a hard time and tell them to buck their ideas up. Somebody could be depressed. Somebody could be suffering from mental health issues. You can write those things in if you feel comfortable doing so and you feel competent doing so. Now, I will touch on certain emotional conditions, but some I kind of shy away from because I don't know enough about it to feel that I can write it convincingly. So I've done some mental health stuff in my book. So, for example, in Shaber, one of my characters does have a mental breakdown. as a result of too much hatred, basically, and effectively goes into almost comatose state as a result of a sort of fugue broke on that, and somebody has to break her out of it. So you can address those sort of things. That's where that old, slightly hoary cliche, the write what you know, comes in. I mean, I'm not saying you have to have been depressed to write about depression, nor necessarily in love to have written about a character who's in love, but it helps to have some appreciation of those things to kind of get a flavour of what you're doing. So I don't like that cliche because it's a dangerous one, because you can't write about, you can't experience everything. So does that mean I can't write about it? Well, no, it doesn't. But there are some traps there. So do a bit of research, is my understanding. And if you can, hang out with different people in different sort of places to find out what they're like. It's okay. So in this particular one, it's Commander Dustle says the colleague ends 99% of his sentences with "Do you know what I mean?" It drives me nuts. And I've got a friend who uses the phrase "I know, right?" Everything you say, and they just come back with "I know, right?" And it's like, you don't, stop saying that. It's just pointless. So it's because of how he's acted in the past. Like in this particular character, he's blaming himself for something that went disastrously wrong. So I'd expect that character to be, if they're still driven by that guilt, very non-committal to anything else that's kind of going on around them. I think that's kind of how I would play that sort of thing. Or maybe trying to do all sorts of things to cover it up and not think about it, so it doesn't have to be dealt with. So they might be over the top on lots of things, because they're just trying desperately not to think about whatever the thing that happened in the past is. Because if they stop being over the top and they stop being loud and in everybody's face, then they'd actually have to start thinking about the thing. So all those sorts of things. Now there are a few other pitfalls as well. Okay, in this space. Now there's a brilliant website which is worth a visit just because it's good fun. Which is one that I think a Reddit one, which is men writing women and doing it badly. Okay, if you're going to write female characters, please actually maybe have met a woman. And maybe had a sensible conversation with one at some point. It's not crazily difficult to do. I was very worried about this early on. It's like, well, I'm a bloke. How could I possibly write a convincing female character? As it turns out, it's not such a big issue. Okay, it's not such a big issue at all, because you can just observe things, and with a bit of observation and things, you can write perfectly convincing female characters if you're a bloke, and vice versa is true as well. However, it is possible from either perspective to get these things very, very, very badly wrong. Okay, and there are countless, and I don't need to. You can go and look them up after. Some of them are very funny. Men writing women tend to, the classic stuff that they tend to do is they concentrate on, dare I say it, certain physical attributes rather than anything else, that's a very obvious amateurish man writing a woman kind of mistake. Okay, you just don't need to do that. It's very twee, it's very silly, and it's not what your readers want to read. Okay, so just don't bother. It's the personality that counts. Yeah, as in so much of real life, it's the personality of the person, the character you're creating that is interesting. If I don't know if there is a women writing men badly Reddit or the equivalent. Maybe there should be, because there's quite a few of those that you come across as well. We think, really, that's not what men do. A lot of the time, men are way more straightforward than how they're painted in some literature written by women, because maybe we're not as complicated. I don't know, but there's some things that don't quite sit as like that. That's not what a woman would do. and that's not what a man would do. And that's before you get onto the whole spectrum of gender and things that obviously is a current thing as well. And I personally don't know enough about it to feel like I can write convincingly about a lot of these things. So I've generally tried, and I did this most famously in my own work with Elite Reclamation, and I think I mentioned this before, is I took all the gender out of the story at the beginning. And so I just wrote the characters without any kind of preconceptions that they were male, female, or anything else, because I'm like science fiction and stuff. They could be green blob aliens from Mars, as far as I'm concerned. But they were just characters. Okay, the gender didn't matter to me at all in writing it. And in the mid drafts, the kind of classic gender roles of Hassan and Kahina were reversed. So Kahina's character was originally a bloke, and Hassan was originally a woman. And I got quite a long way down that writing that story, and then just thought, it doesn't feel like it's the right way round in some way. It just didn't quite sit right. So I just reversed the gender. Didn't change anything else. Okay, didn't change anything else at all, and it just sort of felt right. So I thought, I'll go with that then. And so. I quite often write without gender at all in the script. I can quite often will just do a they said in some of the early stuff and let it sort itself out later on if it's even important to the story, because an awful lot of the time it isn't. And then if there's something that I want to specifically portray, then I'll maybe the gender will come into that conversation a little bit, or maybe it won't. It depends a little bit on what's going on. For example, in my latest series, I had a kind of old cantankerous bloke, kind of wizened sort of, I suppose a father figure, crusty old space dog kind of a person. And I was reading this in, and I just thought, this is just getting a bit too. It feels a bit too cliched to have this character like this, because he's kind of an old Han Solo. Sort of a guy, maybe a bit there's Obi-Wan Kenobi-ish kind of overtones in there, and I thought this is a bit derivative, a bit dull, a bit boring. So I've changed the gender and turned it into a kind of an older woman. So I've got this 60-70-year-old woman character who's actually the kind of backstop of the crew. Who they go to with all their kind of, you're old and wise, but presumably, can you, what do I do, so she's become a slightly different, nuanced character, which I think actually works better for the story than, kind of classic kind of old dude. And sometimes that just feels right. I can't necessarily explain why I would necessarily choose a character that way. They just sort of evolve and shape themselves into things. Do I do it specifically for diversity and stuff like that? No, I don't. I don't count up how many, female, male, trans, gay, whatever characters I have, and go, right, there's a percentage of that and a percentage of this. I don't do that. The same with religions, the same with creed, the same with skin colour. I don't. That doesn't bother me at all. I'm not here to, wave a flag for anybody in that kind of sense. And I would advise you not to do it yourself unless you're particularly motivated to do so, because you can be accused of not doing things and then doing things. just let it be what it's going to be. I think that's probably easiest as a writer. There is a school of thought on that note. There is a school of thought that everything that you write is either a statement or an anti-statement about the society that you're in, and I see a lot of this on Twitter, particularly. Saying unless you are challenging the status quo, you are tacitly agreeing with the status quo, whatever that status quo is. I think, if you feel motivated to join in that discussion and fight for a position, I think it's perfectly reasonable for your story to reflect that. I think that's fine, but be straightforward about that. Personally, I don't do that. I don't try and inject any political or gender political or whatever it is nowadays. I don't even know what the terms are, into my writing. I'm kind of not interested in the debate because it seems very artificial and polarized to me. And there's always a danger that you're going to create attention that isn't there in your own work. Now, if you've got something to say it. Authors have always done that. Science fiction has always done that. It's always been a great vehicle for telling, or challenging people to do that. If you want to do that, that's absolutely fine. But if you don't want to do that, that's absolutely fine as well. Okay, so don't feel that you have to. So this business about unless you agree with me or disagree with me, I don't agree with that at all. I'm just here to tell some stories. That's what I do. But if you want to make a point, make a point. Okay, so I don't join in these debates about things like that on Twitter and stuff because I'm really not interested. Okay, and nobody's really going to be interested in my opinion anyway because I'm a white middle-aged guy. So it's like, okay, I'll just stay out of this. Okay, because I know I'm a white middle-aged guy. And middle-aged, middle class, and probably privileged, and all those sort of things. Okay, so I've got maybe I've got an agenda anyway that I'm not aware of. So and unconscious bias and all those kind of things. I know those things exist, and I'm just here to write some stories, right? That's what I do. Okay, that's the only bit I'm really interested in. I'm not here to change the world, because I wouldn't know what to change it to. But people will read into your motives regardless. They will, and they have, and they do, and it's quite distressing actually sometimes that you get accused of doing a thing. I got accused in my which one was it? In Shapewood, I think. Actually, all your characters are white, and I was like, are they? And and when I looked through it, I don't call out skin colour in a single place. Just didn't do it. So you're totally at liberty to decide what the characters look like. Okay, now I've got an idea of what I think they look like, but that's my view. And I suppose you tend to visualise people in much the same way as yourself. Maybe that's the default. And I was challenged by basically saying, well, unless you specifically call it out, then they're going to be white. I was like, well, no, I don't think I necessarily agree with that. You mean I've got to, into my book, I've got to specifically call out certain aspects of somebody's description, somebody's physical characteristics. I'm not, that doesn't sit quite right with me, unless there's a really good reason for doing so. Because otherwise I'm basically taking away some of your imagination, as far as I'm concerned. You decide what the character looks like. I'll give you their eye colour, and I've given you rough height and hair colour. Those are the only two things I actually use because I find them, as I've mentioned before, there's good ways to differentiate characters. Hair is actually one of the early things that you note about somebody, and eye colour I find is good because you don't tend to notice eye colour until you're actually in quite a close personal relationship with somebody, because you have to be quite close to them to perceive eye colour. It's quite hard to see the colour of people's eyes when you're not actually close to them. So by the time you've sat down or having a coffee with them, or you're maybe having a kiss with them, you probably would have noticed the eye colour, right? So it's a bit more intimate, and that's it. Everything else about the character, I've never talked about weight, I've never talked about size, I've never talked about skin colour, none of that. Okay, that's entirely up to you, the reader. You visualise them how you want to visualise them. But I've been told and challenged that unless I specifically say this character is this, then I'm basically supporting, shall I say, the a sort of white supremacy sort of thing, and I think that I find a bit hard to kind of accept. Now, in Reclamation, for example, I had a character called Hassan. Okay. And in my head, Hassan is a sort of Asian guy, right? Because that's how I visualised him. And he's called Hassan, which is a name from that, with that sort of background. Now, he could be a white guy as well. I don't know how you visualised him. And then I've got Luciano Prestigio Giovanni, who is clearly an Italian. Okay, so is he? What does he look like? I don't know. You tell me. And in my current current work, I have actually for once called out that slightly because I want a character who's specifically, a particular kind of, type. But that's unusual for me. So I think tread carefully there. If you want to say something, say it. If you don't want to say anything, don't feel pressured into saying something because it's not. I disagree very strongly with the fact that if I'm not saying something, I'm making a statement. If I'm not saying something, I'm not saying something. And I might have reasons for not saying something, but I'm not saying anything by not saying anything, if that makes sense. So there we go. And you can't call out every possible characteristic that someone could have. And that gets boring if you do. So be careful of that as well. It's supposed to be that the idea that if you only call out the non-white skin characters, then you're treating the white characters as a default. And if you don't describe skin characters at all, that's different again. So I just kind of, I've never seen skin colour as a differentiator anyway. I just haven't. I'm much more interested in how people act and react and treat other people. That to me is way more important. And are they funny? Actually, if they make me laugh and they're amusing, then that's way more attractive than anything else would be. Human aspects of selfishness and kindness and empathy and all those things are way more important to me as characteristics that should be worthy of discussion. So that's where I tend to emphasise. Is this character a nice person or are they not a nice person? It doesn't matter what they really look like. I suppose the only time those sort of things can become a little bit thing is if you have things where people go pale or something like that, maybe you've got to be a little bit careful of things like that. In terms of how you describe kind of things, but bear that in mind. But don't be a slave to the Twitterati in terms of what you can and can't do as a writer. There's an awful lot of people out there who are very, very polarized in what they say must be done. Or what mustn't be done, or what you must do, or what you mustn't do, it's very tricky. Is there a problem in the sense that writers of different ethnics and all those sort of things are underrepresented in writing? I'm sure there probably is. But that's not to do with the people who are writing. I think that's the gatekeepers of publishing, which is why self-publishing is such a game changer for all that kind of stuff. Anybody with the right resources, by which really is at the moment just a PC and an email address, can write a book and publish it and make the most of it. So that level playing field is there. From that perspective. Now, have they got access to the education that allows them to write a book in the first place? Well, that's tricky as well. I don't know enough about all the school systems and various other bits and pieces that brings you up to the starting gate. But all that sort of stuff is more democratic in some ways than it ever has been. And you've just got to kind of go with it. So I don't know. It's a tough one. But all I would say is, if you want to make a statement, make one. And be fearless about it. But if you don't want to make a statement, don't feel obliged that you have to make a statement. See, there's a guy scratching his nose again. Glenn says, I wonder if you read back a section of your own story and mentally change your own perception of what the character looks like and see if readers can imagine them in different ways. So, I've had people who have commented and sent me their own kind of fan artwork of what they think characters in my books look like, and some of them are kind of similar to how I imagine the characters being, and some of them are totally different. Actually in Shadewood, there's a scientific reason whereby the characters probably would be light-skinned. And that's because it's a red dwarf star and there isn't any ultraviolet light most of the time, so there would be no reason to have any kind of pigmentation in your skin. Now, that's a technical reason for that particular set of novels. Doesn't necessarily mean that stuff is, impossible. But that's just the thing on that particular planet. It's only infrared light. There is no ultraviolet, so you would have no, it's melatonin, I think, is the pigment in your skin. There would be no reason to have it. There are technical reasons in my novel why they probably would be pale skin, but I've not called it out because I don't think it's particularly important to do so. But it's there in the background of my head as a technical explanation for those sort of things if I ever needed it. And I think about those sort of things. That sort of stuff's important. Now, if I was doing a story of a civilization on a planet where there was an awful lot of infrared light, everybody would be dark-skinned. There would be no way around that. You'd have to be dark-skinned, otherwise you'd be dead. I haven't written that story because I haven't. I just haven't had time to do anything like that. But if that was a scientific requirement, a scientific requirement is a scientific requirement as far as I'm concerned. If I'm writing a hard science fiction book, in Shadewood it was the other way around. There isn't any ultraviolet, so you don't need anything to protect you from ultraviolet light. It's kind of as simple as that in those stories. And it's difficult. You've got to be conscious of the environment you're writing in, and the gender discussions that are going on today are very much a part of society today, which probably wasn't the same 15, 20, 30 years ago. And I think it's good that we talk about these things now. I don't like the militant attitude that an awful lot of people take about them. And we've talked before in the stream that there seems to be very much, if you're not entirely with me, then you're entirely against me. And actually, no, I might agree with you on some bits, but I disagree with you on others. And that's a perfectly reasonable position to take. I don't have to agree with you on everything because I may feel you're wrong on one particular subject. Just because I'm aligned with you on this topic doesn't mean I'm going to be aligned with you on another topic. That's called having an opinion, and that's okay. It's not evil or bad, okay? It's okay. And for goodness sake, it's science fiction. That's what we talk about mostly on here. We can make all sorts of weird and wacky things. Different skin pigmentations, different colours. What happens if Star Trek had green alien ladies, didn't they? I mean, scantily clad green alien ladies, but green alien ladies nonetheless. Maybe we get into designer skin colours in the future. What does that mean? Do we get into genetic engineering to remove perceived physical flaws with ourselves in the distant future? All those things are easily within the realm of possibility for science fiction, and we can go there and explore the implications of that. What does it mean to have custom genetics and all those sort of things? That science fiction is brilliant at that sort of stuff. So if you want to go there and explore what that actually means for the context of some future society. Alan says, in one of my works it's important that two women look physically very different, so I've imagined them to be of two different races. So that is something that evolution will possibly do to us in the future. If you have, at the moment, we're tending to more homogeneity because we have travel around the world, so it's very easy for humans to mix with each other, and so we tend to be, over time, the differences between us will become less and less and less because we're intermingling so much. But if humanity ever got isolated from, two batches of humanity ever got isolated from each other for a significant period of evolutionary time, we would divert into two separate races, and it would be us and them, and it really would be us and them because we wouldn't be able to reproduce with them. They would be a different species, and that's happened in the past, and it might happen again. It depends on what happens in the future. So all those sorts of things are there to explore in science fiction. Had that with the Time Machine, with the Eloi and the what are the things that lived underground? I can't remember what they were called. That's a topic. Humanity has split into two different species in the future. Maybe that's what will happen. Science fiction can explore that. Are characters and their actions or plot topics a bigger point of dispute with some readers in your experience? I don't know, that's a good question, actually. I think people spot inauthentic characters quite fast. If people, if something about what they do doesn't ring true in that situation. I mean, my wife's very good at spotting these things. when we're watching a TV show. Well, that person just isn't acting how they used to act. What's happened to them? They've just suddenly changed their attitude. There we go, more locks. There we are. People. I think we're quite good at emotionally working out whether a character is kind of authentic or not, and whether or not it sits right with what they're doing in the story. Why is that person suddenly going off and doing that? Why would they do that? If something feels off kilter there, I think it's quite easy to spot. But I'd agree also that plot is very easy to spot holes in it. I mean, I'm always doing it now. I was like, really? Why are they going off to do? Why are they splitting up? Don't split up. It never helps. And we've got to split up. Why? So nobody asks that question. So those sort of things. I think it's quite easy to pick up plot holes. I find in my experience, my wife is much better at picking up the emotional cues for characters going a bit weird, and I'm way better at spotting the plot holes. I'll spot plot holes a million miles off. My wife will go, "Oh, I didn't even think about that." Whereas that character, I mean, what was he thinking? Why would he do that? That sort of stuff. So it depends on what your outlook is, and what you're interested in. But yeah, both can be easily subject to problems. So you should spend a bit of time on both, I think, as a good writer, sitting down going, is my character doing what my character really would do in this situation, or am I just driving them towards a thing that I need them to do because that's what I've written as the story outline? If you can make it that your character goes into that situation kind of like, and is surprised by the situation and has to find a way to cope with it, that's a better way than making it a contrived situation where the character's outcome is predetermined and then events happen to fit that thing. I find it difficult to decide how people speak. It's easy to end up with everyone in the story talking like, yes, and that's... I tend to go through and play with little techniques like making somebody very short and snappy. So for example, if a character would, if you're writing the dialogue and it first comes out like with, well, no, I don't think we should do that. What do you mean we don't think we should do that? We ought to go out and do it. No, I don't think that's the right thing to do. Both characters sound a bit similar. So you could change it around to say, one character says, no, the thing that we should do is this, and the other character just responds, no way, not happening, not now. They're much more abrupt. So sometimes it's worth looking at the dialogue and going, actually, I'm going to change the way they speak to just be really abrupt and short. Nope, not doing it. Rather than, I don't think we should do that. That's not the way I want to do it. Which maybe sounds a bit like the first character. You can change things like that around to sort of make the dialogue a bit more differentiated for that character. Or sometimes say nothing at all. Character B just folds their arm and goes, and if you can figure out how those characters act and the things that differentiate them as a speech level, that's quite important as well, I think. And try and differentiate them at the dialogue level as well. It is hard to do that. I quite agree, but it's worth doing because it just makes the characters more memorable. If they fall back into sarcasm or defensiveness in their dialogue. I did that a lot with Kiri. She would go on the attack and then pout if she didn't get her way. That was very common with her. Whereas Zoella would always try to find a middle ground. She'd try and cajole people into talking. Maru would obviously be off looking at some piece of technology that he'd found, so he would be paying attention to the conversation. But that differentiated the three characters, and it gave me the ability for them, if they're in the same room, you should be able to figure out who's talking without me actually naming each individual, which takes a bit of time, but it's worth doing that. Those kind of things. So there's a lot to play with there. And as a writer, you've got an awful lot of things to choose. And today, I think there's a bit more of a minefield in terms of what you choose and how you tend to go about it. The only thing I would suggest is always do your research. So if you want a character to be of a particular race or creed or religion or whatever it happens to be, make sure that you represent that accurately as best you can. and kind of put that across. It is worth observing people, and I mentioned this on a previous stream. Don't do that in a creepy way. What are you doing? You're following me around all day. I'm a writer. Oh, well, that's fine then. Don't do that. That will get you probably arrested, or at least probably thumped, or maybe a restraining order or something. You can observe people. I do it quite a lot. I will, I'll do it when I'm out and about, but I make sure I'm doing something else at the time. So, I'm going to order a coffee, or I'm waiting in line for a queue at the bank, or whatever it happens to be, or I'm buying something from a shop, I will just sort of, in the midst of the thing that I'm doing, I'll just be keeping my ears and eyes open to what's going on around me. I try not to deliberately earwig on other people's conversations, but I do try and observe and grab character ideas from people who are kind of hanging around in coffee shops around me, or in the queue at the bank. And quite often you end up with a conversation with somebody about something kind of totally irrelevant to whatever it is you're doing, that you think, oh, actually, that's quite interesting. There's always the crazy guy hanging around somewhere who's got an opinion on something. That's a typical person that you might bump into. There's the mum who's just desperately trying to get her kids to school, who's really, really impatient, just sort of forging on, trying to push through the crowds of people. There's the teenagers who want to be seen but don't want to be seen. All that sort of stuff that you can pull in me. Excuse me, I was eavesdropping and I missed that last thing you said. Can you repeat it? Yes, I'm just making a note for my notebook. By the way, you die horribly in chapter 3, just so you know. So Aries the pacifist says, should I leave my binoculars home? Yes. And it also depends where you live a little bit. I mean, I live in a suburban area at the moment where people generally will say hello to each other and keep themselves to themselves. I used to go into London a lot on the train, and people just don't talk to each other. Going into the big cities, it's like there's like a rule. You don't talk. You don't make eye contact. You don't talk to anybody. It's a train. Okay, this is not a place for conversation. I don't know why that is. It just seems to be a rule. But quite often, if you go on holiday to other places. I love going to Scotland and Northern England, for example, on holiday, because it's like being in your own soap opera when you go up there. You go into the shop for like a can of Coke or something, and it takes you 10 minutes to get through, because, how are you doing? Oh, you've come up from Kent. How's it down there? It's lovely. It was up here. Well, it's better yesterday than it was today. And Aunt Bessie's coming in this afternoon because she heard a glass of me. Did she really? Yeah. Oh yes. Well, there's a story to be told about that. It's like you're in soap opera. You can't get out for 10 minutes because you've got to say all your lines. It's very strange, particularly if you're not used to it. But it's nice, okay, because you can't. Oh, there's a character who just engages with everybody. You can kind of can riff off. So never make any eye contact in the public restroom. No, Lou. No, don't do that. That's probably a bad idea. The one I have, of course, because I've got an old car, I've talked about lots of times. I can park that up, and quite often, 50% of the time I'll come back, and there'll be some guy standing nearby waiting to have a conversation about my car. Because my dad used to have one of these, or I used to have one of them, and that's. It's quite nice if you've got the time and you're not in a rush. But there's also always an opportunity to interact with people, and I think that can be quite fun as a writer, to sort of see what people are, and to be approachable. And I don't know if this is something. Something's a bit strange. I don't know if this is something you exude as a person, because I find particularly when I was in London. I don't go out so much now because I'm stuck behind a computer because of the work I do and various other bits and pieces. I've become way less sociable than I used to be. But when I was in London, I noticed that I would be the person. If somebody was lost and was asking for directions, I would be the person they asked. And it was odd because I'd be in a group of people who, as far as I could tell, were quite similar to me. And I would always get would you mind telling me the way to? Do you know the way to? I was like, why is it always me who gets these people? I don't know whether it was something maybe I'm just exuding this. Obviously clearly got an encyclopedic knowledge of London. I don't know, but or maybe it's just your facial expression is more open and welcoming, or maybe it's the hat. I don't know. It's clearly a sign. And I try to be helpful to anybody I can be helpful to, you try and be open and willing to share things. And maybe that shows up. I don't know. I would definitely ask you, says Cambridge. There we go. Wintermute says, I've always maintained it's easier to move to the north in Great Britain than it is to move to the south. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, when you go, I'm always amazed actually when I travel, because I'm a naturally, I try and be a friendly person. I can be, fed up and cynical at times, and I don't like too much insignificant conversation. Small talk. I get kind of like, really, do we have to go through this again? But I do like friendly people. If somebody goes, so you've come from Kent, have you? Yes, well, yeah, a long old way up the M1. Oh well, I made that trip myself once, never again. You can start having a conversation with these people, and I love accents. I absolutely adore accents. So if somebody's speaking in a way that I haven't heard before, it's just very different to what I'm used to. I kind of like totally tune in, try and listen to that. Sometimes there is, I don't know. Alan says, I was approached by a woman on Docklands Light Railway to watch her luggage while she went to update her travel. Yeah, so it's funny, isn't it, that you can, I don't know whether it's a certain type of attitude or whether your body language is giving off a sign that basically says, yep, I'm probably a trustworthy person, I'll look after your luggage for 5 minutes. I'm the ideal person. I don't know what it is about. Is there some body language that basically says, I'm the ideal person for you to ask directions to the obscure place you're trying to get to? I don't know. Maybe there is. Or Rabdov says, how about writing from an alien point of view of, say, the Earth? Yeah, I mean, you can do those sort of things. I think some of the guys did that in our anthology, which Glenn will doubtless put a link in the chat in a moment because that's his cue. But we wrote. One of the guys wrote. I can't remember who it was now, but wrote a description of humans from the aliens' perspective, and it was it's quite fun to play around with. What do we actually look like to an alien race? They're made of meat, yeah, really weird. I mean, like, that's a strange alien life form, that sort of stuff. So you can play around with all those sort of things, really twist it up. I mean, I say, That's the crazy thing about all of our attitudes to all of this stuff that's consuming people on Twitter, about gender and this, that, and the other, is that 90 at the genetic level, us humans are 99. Every single one of us, regardless of how different we think we are to everybody else, 99.9% of our DNA is entirely the same. It's only that 0.1% of our DNA that changes us. We are all the same. There is no difference. All the differences are social constructs that we've foisted upon ourselves, unfortunately. That's how I view it. That's how I've always viewed it, and that's how I encourage people to view it. We aren't different, and we shouldn't look at each other differently. We can all decide from this point forward not to treat each other differently, to treat each other with respect, with fairness, with equality, etc., etc., etc. And I will always start out by doing that, right? I will always start out by doing that. Now, if you're nasty to me or you're rude, then you kind of that's strike one. But I see no reason not to give you the benefit of the doubt at the off. That's just my kind of philosophical outlook, I suppose. Just because Drew told me to. There we go. Play around with those things. And I mean, I deliberately chose. We're 60% identical to bananas, equal rights for bananas. All life on Earth is very, very closely related, and that's an important thing to have in your head. All these. I fully believe actually that most of the problems that we have are because of the categories that we decide are important. I'm always a bit bemused by that on the on the forms, that you have to fill in for, usually for government stuff. It's either applying for a passport or updating your driver's license, and it basically says your date of birth. Yeah, okay, well that helps identify me. That's fine. What's your name? Yes. Have you been known by any other name? Yeah. Okay. Where do you live? Yeah, that kind of all makes sense. And then it basically says what's your gender, and it says male, female, and recently it now says other, or prefer not to say. They've updated it as a result. And I think to myself, why does that help? That doesn't actually help identify me. Because when I was born, what my name is, where I live. Why does the gender matter? Why is it important? Because I'm applying for a passport here or a driver's license. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it's a categorization that has, as far as I can say, no value at all. Why do we even bother with these categorizations? And another thing it does on the government thing is, what's your ethnic origin? Well, given that we're 99.9% the same, why is that even a category? We make problems for ourselves by having all these damn categories. And most of the time they don't, wouldn't it be funny if you went to a website and it basically said, what's your basic attitude? Are you violent? Are you angry? Are you empathetic? Are you nice? Are you kind? Are you slightly opinionated? Are you a bit arrogant? It's all the same stuff. Yeah. Do you have strong opinions on Marmite? Or things like that. Do you like fish and chips or not? Do you think they're cookies, or do you think bagels are best? Is it waffles? I think those are. It's all like, why is this information being captured? Why is it important? We're just people. We don't need these categories to differentiate ourselves. They're not helpful an awful lot of the time. So maybe some people, it's important for themselves. You may find those things, important, and I get that, but I'm not sure that we necessarily need to collect all the information. If it's an important thing for you to state what you are, then fair enough, I suppose. But I think we could possibly rethink some of these categories a bit. Because we assign so much meaning to them, and I don't always think they were more particularly helpful. So there we go. Anyway, that was a bit of a rant, wasn't it? Ethnic origin, part Neanderthal. And I don't know. I mean, I don't even know what my ethnic origin should be. I mean, I have to tick the sort of white British box, but is that really what I am? Because my ancestors came from Scandinavia, and before that, presumably they probably came from Europe, and before that they probably came from Africa. I don't know. Is that important? How far back am I supposed to go? What does it mean? We align ourselves, and on so many things we align ourselves by imaginary lines on a map. Go across the border. Well, there isn't actually a line painted on the ground. There's nothing there. It's just we've decided there's a line there. Very strange. I don't know, but it's a bit odd. So going back to the point, characters are people who are notable. Okay, if you say someone's a character, they're kind of like, well, they're interesting because of, maybe they've got a funny opinion on something, or they act in a particular way that's different, or anything like that. If you can make the characters in your book stand out, no, I'm white Canadian. Yeah, well, half of me is. That's my father's side of the family. I don't know. Well, whatever. But they actually thinking about it. My mother's side of the family came from Ireland. So that's kind of got a Celtic thing going on there. My father's side of the family definitely came from Canada, but only for 3 generations, and they came from Scotland before that, and then came into Scotland from Scandinavia. So I don't know. And I've got this. I suppose because I'm British because I have been naturalised to be British. So because I was born in Canada, I've effectively emigrated. I live in England, but I'm not English because I wasn't born here. But I'm British because I live in the British Islands. In fact, I live in the country that's called the United Kingdom. No, actually, let me get this right. I live in England, which is a country, but I'm not English because I wasn't born here. But I am British because that's the nationality of the island. And therefore, I'm part of what is currently the United Kingdom, which is the political entity. So, what does that make me? Stark raving mad. That's what it makes me. It's all very artificial. I find it all very artificial. I'd like to consider myself a citizen of the planet Earth, if only there was such a thing that I could be. Maybe I'm a Viking. That would be cool, wouldn't it? I could wear a different type of hat if I was a Viking. I'm human. Yeah, I am human, and that's as far as I feel it needs to go. But there we are. I understand that not everybody feels the same as me. That's fine as well. So if going back to the point though, characters are people who stand out. Characters are people who stand out, they're notable for one reason or another. And if you can make your characters in your book stand out and be memorable to the reader, sometimes even after they finish the book, but certainly within the context of the book, then I think that's a really significant thing to have achieved for your book. If you come away from a book and you can't really remember who the characters were, you kind of missed a trick. I think you kind of missed a trick. I mean, for all its simplicity, and its hero's tale told once again, you're never going to not know who Luke Skywalker is and Princess Leia is and Darth Vader is and Han Solo is, right? Because they're good characters in that sense. And you're not going to forget from the original Star Trek, you're not going to forget Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, right? Because they are good characters. You've got the leader, you've got the medical guy, you've got the stoic Vulcan, you've got the Scottish engineer. And yes, there's cliches in there. Sometimes cliches can be a bit much, but good characters, you remember them. And they are consistent. You know what they're going to do in any given situation because that's what their character is all about. And that's a good thing, I think. That's a good thing. So there we go. Anyway, my friends, it's time for me to stop wittering on about all sorts of stuff that may or may not be related to the topic. It's time for me to stop and go and do something completely different instead. But thank you for your company once again tonight. I hope there's been the occasional nugget of wisdom and maybe hopefully not too much rubbish in there. My family is original from Pangaea. But it's always a pleasure, so thank you very much. Right, so I am on holiday from Friday. I'm hoping to do my Thursday stream as well. We'll see how that goes. But I am on holiday from Friday for a week and a bit, so I think the writing stream in a fortnight's time probably will be my next stream actually, so I will see you then. So look after yourselves, be good in this crazy strange world that we live in. Try not to get arrested for watching people and observing things. Do what you do, and always, my friends, always write on. Be good, and I'll see you soon. Bye bye now.